Elections to 5 states coming up. UP and Punjab, of course, the most important of them. This is going to be a key test for the government. But before that, in fact, just before those elections kick off, there is another key test, that of course being the budget. As we look at what various sectors are expecting, let's just also keep our eye firmly on what entrepreneurs want. And that's what we're looking at over the next half an hour. Let me introduce my very special panel of guests that we have for you today. Rituparna Chakraborty, co-founder and executive vice president of TeamLease, one of India's leading staffing companies. Albinder Dhinsa, co-founder of Grofers, an on-demand online grocery delivery service. Nitin Saluja, founder at Chayos, a chai cafe chain. Utkarsh Biradar, vice president product Shop Clues, an online shopping portal, and of course Mrinal Sinha, chief operating officer MobiKwik, a mobile wallet and online payment system. So let's get started right away. Rituparna, exactly a year ago there was one day the government had, in fact led by the Prime Minister, devoted to entrepreneurship in the country. But 2016 perhaps didn't turn out the way that India's entrepreneurs or startups had imagined. What is the one big ticket thing, if I could ask you, that you would expect from the government to change the story as it were this year?
I kind of label last year's budget as the Goldilocks budget, just right, not too warm, not too hot, not too cold. I think there was a lot of promising commitments made during that budget. I think one of the most important things that the government needs to focus on is that while the fiscal dole-outs have been given, I don't think that those dole-outs or those incentives or those schemes and benefits are actually reaching out to the people who actually require them. There is a challenge in terms of communication, awareness and access. Unless the government actually focuses on these announcements merely are not going to help.
Albinder, as someone who's in the online grocery delivery service, you've had a bumpy 2016, more in the headlines for the wrong reasons than the right ones, which is very different from 2015. What do you believe the government can do for players like yourself in this space to sort of make this year different?
I think the government can't do much for our businesses. I think we have to sort of figure our own way through it. Broadly, what we do expect is that over time the government will make sure that we are on a level playing ground when it comes the difference between the online and the offline. As more organized online players, we still have to comply with a lot of the regulations, which the offline guys are also supposed to comply with, but they don't. And I think that creates sort of, that sort of defeats the purpose of a lot of initiatives that the government has recently also taken, including notes ban. If we can't stop the smaller traders, the merchants from actually going back to their old ways where they dodge indirect taxes, they don't pay income taxes, that really skews the battlefield away from the startups to overcome that. But I don't think, we don't expect the government to come and help us and help us figure out our own businesses. I think we'll have to do that on our own.
That's actually quite interesting because it comes in the backdrop of two of our biggest startups talking about the need for the government to step in, Nitin, and sort of do something more for them. We've heard from Flipkart and Ola talk about, in a sense, about protectionism. Before we move on this, how do you see that demand and that debate?
I don't think Ola and Flipkart need that kind of protectionism as has been put forth by them. I think the more the competition, the better we all get, the better it is for the country, and we've got to be on our feet, and that's how we've got to fight.
Right.
Not a big one on that.
Right. Mrinal, would you agree?
Yes and no. So I don't think we need protectionism, but I think the point that some of these founders are trying to make is that if you take a startup which is in the US and trying to compete in India versus another startup which is in India, or similarly, if you compare India versus China, there is a difference in the level playing field because access to capital is easier in the US and easier in China. So, so long as you tackle that difference, right, we're fine. Don't need protectionism. But at least, I think...
but is the battle increasingly becoming only about who has deeper pockets?
It's not only about who has deeper pockets. It's, risk capital across the world has fueled innovation, right? That's true, everywhere. That's the reason, Silicon Valley exists. Therefore, capital is a very important part of enabling entrepreneurship, and therefore risk capital has to become available. I'm talking not just about one or two companies, but in general to the Indian ecosystem. Risk capital from India has to become available to the Indian ecosystem. The reason is, if you think about the internet, in about 8 years from now, internet contribution to the GDP from the internet will be higher than infrastructure. And in the light of that, I think some of India's biggest institutions, some of biggest capital holders have to come behind the internet ecosystem in a substantive way, the way the Chinese pension fund is done.
Given all this, Utkarsh, what can the government do? Are there more serious expectations from the government on how they can do to level the playing field, whether the point that Albinder makes between online and offline players, or the point that is being made about risk capital?
So yes, so I think that...
how much do we seriously expect them to do? I mean, it's okay to have a never-ending wish list, but
no, not too many expectations for sure, not too many expectations. And part of being an entrepreneur is, of course, being able to fight your own battles. And yes, level playing field, like Mrinal is saying, that availability of risk capital, the government can do a lot in terms of, making the capital available. Both, I mean, just from the point of view that if India is easier to do business with, you will see a lot more risk capital coming in, as simple as that. If you think that internet is the next thing, and it's simple things like accelerating the growth of internet to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and that's infrastructure, and that's pretty much government.
And that's
so I think these are a couple of things
and that's now going to be imperative, because how do you go cashless? How do you move to a digital economy if you don't do that? But Nitin, coming back to you, is there anything that you're expecting to hear in the finance minister's speech that sort of, or will you be looking out to hear for yourself, for your business, for entrepreneurs like yourself? Is there anything that you expect? Is there anything that you're hoping for?
Post demonetization, what I would be delighted to see is all the measures that just boost some spending. Offline businesses have been slightly hit by demonetization.
Just slightly.
Slightly, yes. Okay. I would very rightly use the word slightly, and I would be delighted to see all those measures that just boost spending going forward.
Albinder, you've gone on record to say that actually post the note ban, you've seen a bump up in business. I mean, we've also now hearing some of those e-commerce players saying that people have been using their cards a lot more. MobiQuick's talking about all those new millions of users that are now coming on board. But I'm sure that there are serious challenges that still remain as well, going beyond the big cities, tier 2, tier 3, and so on?
Those are more structural challenges that are not startup specific either, right? We see a lot of issues when we go and open in tier 2, tier 3, even if we are doing infrastructure investments, getting the right labor force, meeting sort of the age expectations, all those structures.
Why people are going to be looking at the budget is of course how we're going to stimulate growth, also job creation. Now we know the jobs have been under pressure. People like yourselves are sort of working so closely in this space. What are you looking for? What are the kind of signals, what are the kind of hints that you're looking for as far as jobs are concerned? Because that's now becoming quite worrying.
So I have a 3x3 thing ask list, honestly, non-fiscal in nature. The three things that we need to do to actually boost formal employment generation. One, I think the finance minister in 2015 did allude to a little bit that PF and ESIs in India have hostages and not clients, and hence we need to give the choice of structuring of the wages, especially to low-income workers, around how they would like their wages to be structured. Essentially give them choice around whether they would want to contribute their contribution of the PF, whether they want it to be actually put in EPF or in NPS, or whether they would like to contribute their share of the SIC or just opt for some IRDA, sponsored scheme. Similarly, the organizations today, I mean, you'll be fascinated, every employer, and this is particularly relevant if you were to create jobs, formal jobs, through actually having a lot more entrepreneurs coming into in India, setting shop in India. Any regular mid-sized businesses need to procure 25 plus different identity numbers. The identity numbers could be 5-digit to as high as 21 digits. Wow. I mean, things like Shram Pehchan Sankhya, ESIC, IC number, labor establishment number, TAN, PIN, service, PAN number,
It's
service
endless,
tax
right.
numbers. I think these create bottlenecks for organizations to set shop. If we can have only one, which is PAN, and go with that. Also, we need to focus on paperless, cashless, and presence-less. All labor law compliances need to be made online, and honestly, it is far from that. At the moment, organizations annually have to cut down 6 lakh trees just to do paper compliances. Just not working. It's absolutely critical that we need to convert skills and degrees, and until and unless that's allowed, we won't be able to expand the skill, the skill challenge, the skill pool at this point of time.
Sure, you made two important points. I just interrupt you there, Rituparna, just one moment. Let me get my panel in here. Nitin, the point, we've now gone blue in the face, it seems to me, in recent years especially, talking about the ease of doing business or the lack of it. When the ratings come out, we say, oh my God, we barely moved 2 places from 132 to 130. Look at these countries ahead of us. These countries shouldn't be there. And there's much hand-wringing and chest beating around this. But there are a lot of people out there, people like yourself, who perhaps feel that the more things change, there's little or no sign of it. The points that Rituparna has made about just how challenging it can be, it's almost a cliche to say, you can set up a business in India, but folding it up then is another challenge. Are things any better?
The brick and mortar and the online, you see how different new businesses are sort of moving ahead. I would say, simply put, a single window, presence-less. These are words that the government can bring in. And one simple ask is, well, if you really need help, ask us. We would be more than glad to sort of help you with that. Single window today is not a very big thing. A lot of private companies do it. And so why can't the government do it? Ask us, and we will be glad to help, kind of thing.
That's the big challenge. What about you, Mrinal? How do you see this? The fact that we just can't seem to be able to crack this ease of doing business. The global stats also tell us how poorly we are faring on this.
I think the visions have been laid out by the government in the past by different people, but I don't think it's become...
I think it's more walking the talk, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's programmatic. So to your point, it's not yet walking the talk, right? I think if the intent needs to be converted on the ground to action, that's not happened yet.
I just want to spend a few minutes now just to talking about the big banner headlines that we saw in 2015 when we talk about startups and India's entrepreneurs. And what happened in 2016 was more of a reality check. Albinder, first to you, what were the kind of key lessons that were learned last year? And though you've said that you're not really expecting much help from the government, or you don't expect that there's much that the government can do, what do you believe can be done just generally in the space by players like yourself to ensure sort of a more smoother 2017?
I think the startup community in general needs to take a sort of fundamental look at, what are the things that we did wrong over the past couple of years. Some of these things were almost forced upon the ecosystem, that there is no way for you to get started without funding, without raising external funding. But we can definitely sort of try to do a lot better in terms of localizing our products, trying to understand, not just aping what was done in the West. I think also something which the government really needs to sort of step up is the Startup India event was a good starting point. But if you see the actionables that came out of that, they were very few and negligible. Part of that is...
That one nodal agency, this is still, there's a big question mark on who it's reporting to and who's a part of it, and what about the rollout a year on?
Exactly, but a more consistent push around getting more people to sort of step into entrepreneurship is another thing which will actually fuel a lot of innovation. I think a lot of people just get stopped at like level 1, where they say that it's so hard to just get started, that why bother at all. I think making that transition smoother for a lot of people, if this government can just achieve that, I think that will be huge for the ecosystem, maybe not now, but over the next 5 to 7 years.
Nitin, the cynics would say that, we celebrated startups and entrepreneurs too early. And this was in 2015, and then last year was a real reality check. They're also saying things like, which we've been saying for a while, that is it like the bubble of the 1990s? Is that what has happened? .com bubble that really happened? But you disagree with that?
I 100%, maybe more than 100%.
Tell us why.
It is out there for everybody to just see.
So it's more real.
it is 100% real.
Right.
Everybody out here in this room and many hundreds, thousands who are not in this room, they are creating real value. There are hiccups in every long journey, and 1 year and a half, 2 years, it'll just be some dot somewhere, and nobody will even remember it in time to come.
When we look back, this is not going to be the defining moment really of the
so it will be one of those steps that had to be one of those paths that had to be taken, to be crossed in order to get the right set of learnings, and that's what has happened. So yeah, I think it's just the right thing to do. It's just the right thing to have happened. So.
Sure. Rituparna, so are we realizing that this is just part of the evolution? One problem someone told me very recently is that we are just so taken aback by failure. It's still such a bad word in this country that people are just not willing to accept that people will stumble, rise again, make mistakes, company will start and shut down, and yet we will get some great value, global companies from India being created as well. But as a society, are we sort of open to coming to the point that these are people who are trying out new things, trying out new ideas? Some will succeed, many will not, and it's okay.
Yeah, I think what has happened in the startup scenario has been remarkable, and there is no way we can beat them up. I think statistics show that it's expected that globally there are statistics that 1 out of 10 organizations will fail. Given that the number of organizations that have actually cropped up, the innovative organizations that come out in the anvil, it's inevitable some of them will fail, but we cannot write off what is happening in India and then just sit back and say something's wrong with it. I think it's inevitable. There are a lot of learnings, and I honestly believe what's happened in the last 2 years, as a country we have learned more than we probably have learned in the last 2-3 decades. And so I think I'm sure that the entrepreneurs who've gotten and burned their fingers, they're better off in terms of how much they know, what they need to do for the next in their next venture.
I see your point, but I want to ask you, Utkarsh, of all the things that the government has said and delivered on, or perhaps not, we are also told consciously that over and over again that there is just great expectations every time, and this is not from one sector, this is from across sectors. And how much really can the government deliver? Growth is under pressure, the jobs are under pressure, startups of course being one big community, and the government says they're committed to looking at this space, but just like one of the many, and this year the challenges are way too many, plus those key elections coming up. So realistically speaking, is there anything to expect?
Well, at least so they've made this thing with the demonetization. They've taken a stance. So get it right. So that's our ask. Simple things like it's leading to cashless, and that's sort of helping businesses now. So get the act right. Simple things like regulations on TDRs, MDRs. Can it be self-regulated? Kind of take those things. Get the GST thing right. So these are 2 or 3 concrete things I would say.
That's such a political
take the
hot
ambiguity
potato at the
out
moment
of, yes.
that who's to say now where that's going, right? Absolutely. What about you, Mrinal? You're someone, of course, who's sort of really in the thick of things as far as the digital India movement is concerned, and there is, of course, no doubt that there's going to be a big focus on helping India go digital and what more the government can do in this space in the budget.
I mean, there's a number of things that the government is doing even without the budget. So I don't think there is too much to ask. I think the one thing I would like to see, not as MobiKwik but for the general ecosystem, is to figure out some structures for getting Indian money into the ecosystem, whether it is our insurance companies or pension funds, and that'll kind of give a long-term dividends for the ecosystem.
Well, I'm totally running out of time, but I'll start by wrapping up the same question to all my panelists. Rituparna, you go first. Short answers, please. If the finance minister were to be listening in to what you have to say next, what would you ask from him?
Measures that one needs to take in terms of better infrastructure, better laws, better access to capital has to be actually actualized for us to actually see more jobs happening in this country in manufacturing.
Sure. Mrinal?
Invest behind infrastructure, invest behind internet the way we have invested behind infrastructure.
Okay. Utkarsh?
More cashless, more internet to tier 2, tier 3 infrastructure, and clarify the stuff around GST.
Sure.
And take
So
the
again,
ambiguity
taxation
away.
and of course make Digital India beyond just a catchy phrase, make it a reality. Nitin?
Just 2 asks. One, make Skill India program way more deployable, way more easily adoptable, and roll out some SOPs for cold logistics. That's a big nightmare for us.
Right. Okay. Arvind, I'll give you the last word.
We wouldn't mind
Logistics
that.
again,
We
yeah.
wouldn't mind the push to invest in logistics, especially tier 2, tier 3 areas.
Well, you're asking for politics and economics sort of to go in tandem and sort of work hand in hand on that. GST is still a big challenge, but of course other issues of taxation, taking India to truly digital and infrastructure. Well, thanks all so much for taking time to speak to us. We'll of course be back after the Finance Minister has made that speech to see just what the panelists have to say then and just the kind of wish list that was accepted or not. For the moment, thanks so much for watching. Keep your thoughts coming in. Write to us at startup@ndtv.com. Goodbye. Thanks all.